Welcome to the Best Little Town Podcast, your go-to source for everything happening in the town of Bedford's local government. Whether it's new initiatives or important decisions shaping our town's future, you'll hear it right here. This podcast is dedicated to keeping our residents informed and engaged.
Hello, it is Wednesday, July 9th, 2025. My name is Bart Warner. I'm the town manager of Bedford, Virginia. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this episode of the Best Little Town Podcast, brought to you in conjunction with our partners at Media Squatch. This is a program designed to provide greater information about the activities of our town council meetings when they occur to all of our citizens, businesses, and interested parties. I'm joining you today because council met last night. That would have been Tuesday, July 8th. Prior to the regular meeting, they did have a work session to talk about several pieces of property owned by the town within the corporate limits that, frankly, the members of council examined in greater detail, talked about future plans for that property or possible uses for it, and also the possibility of maybe putting some of those parcels up for sale if there might be parties who are interested in obtaining them. There were about 8 different random pieces of property within town. I'll just kind of go through the list of what they talked about. The first was vacant property just north of Liberty Lake Park on Burks Hill Road. That was a property that was recently acquired by the town about 5 years ago. Consensus of town council was to wait and see what could be done with that property. We've had a couple of people approach us about clearing the area and adding additional parking for the adjacent Liberty Lake Park. We also had a plan developed by Hurt and Profit about 5 years ago that involved adding some athletic fields and facilities there. So it's about 4.9 acres altogether. But council decided that there may be some value or some use in that. So going to kind of continue to evaluate that property and what it could be used for. Next on the list was a piece of property known as Bill Waters Park along Railroad Avenue, which I mentioned as the train goes by, coincidentally. This is a triangular green piece of property that's kind of a transitional area between neighborhood and our former Robotex industrial area. Consensus of council was to see if anyone might be interested in either obtaining or taking over use and programming of that property. The next piece of property I talked about is up on Helm Street near the reservoir, which is on the south side of town, up on the hill above South Street. There's a parcel with some developable acreage there that council determined that they might be willing to put out for bid or possibly for sale to interested parties. Next, they talked about a triangular piece of property on Orange Street at Grove Street. Some of you are probably familiar if you kind of come the back way through town, down here to Media Squatch Studios. That's the large intersection where it's a 3-way intersection. Coming from Grove Street, you have right-of-way. Coming northbound from Main Street, you have a stop sign. Coming southbound from Orange Street, you have a yield sign. There is a triangular piece of property attached to that council determined might be better served by being sold or used by someone else. Next on their list was a triangular piece of property on Orange Street near Haynes. That's an odd piece in a curve as you're heading along towards the Public Works Department. They also determined that that might be worth putting up for sale or for use by an interested party. There is also a vacant parcel adjacent to Reynolds Park on East Main Street that currently does not have any active use as part of the park and is adjacent to another lot that contains a house. And council determined that it might be worth seeing if anybody was interested in obtaining that lot as well. Council also owns a significant lot along Gold Road. Gold Road connects Main Street and Orange Street On the eastern side of Gold Road, there's a parcel that runs almost the length of the road to the Orange Street softball field park. Council indicated that it might be worth it to subdivide the part that's used for a park and also offer up the remaining parcels to see if anyone is interested. Moving on, Greenwood Park, there is a significant part of acreage attached to that park that is currently just a vacant field. Council expressed interest in the possibility of subdividing that and making that available for use or purchase by another interested party. And there are also a couple of large parcels around the base of the D-Day Memorial. These are wooded lots without much frontage. The consensus of council was to see if we might pursue preservation of that as protection of the view shed for both D-Day and the surrounding neighborhood. So that was the purpose of the work session. I will note, and of course we talked to council about this as well, that to dispose of any publicly held property, there are several ways to do that, but most of them require a supermajority vote of 6 members of council. So if council were to advertise any piece of property and negotiate a sale, before that would be final, there would be most likely a public hearing process, and it also would require the votes of 6 of 7 members. So even though they're talking about these things and the possibility of getting rid of some of these properties, it's not a done deal by any stretch, and it's a rather complicated and cumbersome process by design. That work completed, council then moved on to the regular part of the meeting, which began at 7 o'clock p.m. There were 2 members of council who were not physically present, but who were attending via digital means by Zoom. That was Councilman Todd Foreman and Councilman Dwight Evans. The rules for council, their bylaws, as well as state code, state that it is allowable for elected officials to participate in public meetings via digital means, but they have to state the reasons why, and that has to be formally approved by a majority of council. That's kind of an outcropping of life under COVID, when there were quarantines and shutdowns, and we still had business to conduct. So the state code enabled virtual meetings and virtual attendance. However, once that emergency had passed, they noted that it is preferable for people to be physically present and accessible. So that's why we have those rules. The meeting began with authorization by a majority of council to allow Todd Foreman and Dwight Evans to participate by virtual means. The meeting then commenced with approval of the minutes from previous meetings, and then was followed by the report of town manager, which is me. Last night I passed along my appreciation to the producers of multiple special events in conjunction with celebration of the Independence Day holiday, which occurred over the previous weekend. That included the Before the Works event, sponsored by Jonathan Hayden at Liberty Lake Park, and also the fireworks display, which is sponsored by the town of Bedford and conducted by Master Displays on July 3rd. July 3rd is a little bit odd. We did that historically because once upon a time we determined it was cheaper, but now it's become a unique Bedford tradition, and we're kind of proud of the fact that we start the fireworks displays first in the area. That is something that is funded through the general fund and your tax dollars, and in case you're interested, that is at a cost of about $20,000. The next item I reported on was a conversation I had with Dave McCormick, who is the developer of the middle school redevelopment project in the middle of town. I had spoken with him by telephone yesterday afternoon. Mr. McCormick advised that the work on the brick building at the middle school site is expected to be completed, in his words, the middle of next month. Of course, that is being redeveloped for apartment uses, and he reported to me that he currently has 6 applications for the apartments within that building as part of the pre-leasing activity. He also stated that the work on the boutique hotel in the yellow building is underway as well, and that should be completed, in his words, at the beginning of next year. Moving into the agenda items, we then had appearances before council. The first person to appear was Ms. Tracy Davis, who lives on Forest Road. She shared her concerns about the speed limit along Forest Road. That's also Route 221 heading east towards Lynchburg. Currently, that speed limit in her particular area right near the town limits is 45 miles an hour. Council had discussed several months ago about reducing that to 35 miles per hour, which is more of a consistent speed limit in most parts of town, particularly residential areas such as that one. The issue there is right outside of town limits in the county, which is administered by the Virginia Department of Transportation, or VDOT, that speed limit goes up to 55 miles an hour. And we've tried philosophically to kind of promote a gradual reduction or expansion of speed limits on corridors, where you may start with a 25 mile per hour zone, transfer to a 35 mile an hour zone, transition to a 45 mile an hour zone, and to a 55 mile an hour zone for safety purposes. However, in our conversations with VDOT, they indicated that there was no interest on their side to create that 45 mile an hour zone to 55 beyond town limits. So consensus of council, spoke to them after the meeting, was that we're just probably going to proceed with making the speed limit 35 miles an hour. That's on Forest Road, which is Route 221, to the town limits. At that point, it probably will be 55 miles an hour. So if you're heading out of town, that change will be from 35 to 55. If you're heading into town from Forest, that speed limit will drop abruptly from 55 to 35. So in addition to the fact that that's an abrupt change, that's also an area that has some hidden driveways, which we're also going to install some signage, bringing attention to those, and some curves. But based on the request from the citizens and the concerns we received, that will be the direction in which we're headed. The next speaker was Erica McFadden of Good, Virginia, who is the manager of our Bedford Farmers Market. She was very kind to pass along her compliments to our police and public works departments, that she had requested some increased attention to the farmers market area from both of those departments, and that has apparently been taken care of, and she just noted that she appreciated the follow-through. She particularly extended her compliments to Public Works Director Tom Woodard and his colleagues in that department, which was very kind of her and much appreciated. The next speaker was Tim Black, who, as many people know, is our former mayor. Tim is a resident of Mountain Avenue, and he spoke to us about the trip he took to Normandy with the Bedford International Alliance. That is a nonprofit group that exists here in town that, as its name suggests, maintains relationships between the town of Bedford and communities abroad, particularly our historic connection to the communities that the Bedford boys served in during World War II. The town of Ivy Bridge, where they were stationed in England, and then, of course, many communities in Normandy where they stormed the beaches, secured freedom for the world, and in many cases paid a great sacrifice for that. Tim, in his comments, encouraged people to explore joining the organization itself. Again, that's the Bedford International Alliance. He recounted many meaningful experiences during his trip to Normandy, particularly some of the specific commemorations of Bedford and the sacrifices of the Bedford boys in Normandy. He noted that he was very impressed by the fact that the French make great effort to make sure that information and knowledge of history is passed along. There were several school groups that he witnessed on his trip there to Normandy, and he said he interacted with a few of them directly. I think they would corresponded to third graders. And it was just a very meaningful experience. And also, Tim noted, and that's a good point, that we need to make sure that we do pass along the lessons and knowledge of history so we don't forget the special nature of the sacrifices that are made, what makes our community unique, and then also the kind of the cosmic way in which things fit together. Going back to the Bedford International Alliance itself, Tim noted that the group meets about 4 or 5 times a year, and they take this kind of trip to France about every couple of years. So it was good of Tim to come share that experience. For those of you who follow Tim on Facebook, he did have some great photos that he shared during that trip abroad. Moving next into the agenda, it was time for council comments. Mayor Stanley switched things up a little bit. He usually kind of goes across the dais. We're in the seating order, but this time he started immediately to his left with Councilman Stacey Haley. Councilman Haley extended his thanks to the people who were present at the meeting. He also commented on the events that took place in conjunction with the 4th of July weekend and commemoration and the high quality of those events. He particularly extended thanks to Ms. Davis, Ms. McFadden, and Mr. Black for showing up and speaking. Stacey noted that he recently participated in an event in Kansas City in conjunction with his role as the president of the local Elks Lodge, and talked about his interactions with people from across the country, which was very beneficial for him personally, but also in his role with the lodge and also in his role as a council member. So certainly appreciate him sharing that perspective. Councilman Jay Ippolito likewise extended his thanks to the people who were personally in attendance. He noted that the previous Saturday, there was a recognition of Reverend Henderson at Washington Street Baptist Church. Reverend Henderson has been ministering to that congregation for 56 years now, and they hosted a celebration of that service and his impact on the community and the lives of our citizens at Avenel. Councilman Darrell Updike, likewise, said he appreciated all the people who were physically present at the meeting and encouraged people to bring a friend next time when they come along to the meetings. Councilman Dave Foster likewise expressed his appreciation to everyone who was present. He brought attention to an event sponsored by Habitat for Humanity in which they had a blitz build. A house was constructed for a family here in a span of 2 days. He extended his thanks in particular to Mary Zirkle and also the members of the Housing Authority for their support of that activity. And he also noted that currently this week in Bedford, there is a group called Mission Serve, which is working on 7 houses in town. This is a Christian organization that works with youth. These are largely work crews comprised of 13 to 17-year-olds who do an impressive array of repairs to houses that need them, including, but not limited to, full replacement of roofs. Moving on, Councilman Todd Foreman likewise expressed his thanks to the people who were present at the meeting and to those who spoke before council, and he expressed his thanks again to council for allowing him to participate by virtual means. Councilman Dwight Evans also expressed his thanks for people who came personally to the meeting and expounded upon that, and I think what he said is probably true of all council members, that they love to hear from citizens in any way. It's particularly meaningful when people come to the meetings. And again, let me remind you, those are scheduled on a regular basis for the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of each month, beginning at 7 o'clock p.m., 215 East Main Street in the Municipal Building, and it's upstairs. Occasionally, those meetings are canceled when we do not have an agenda, but we do put out notice of that. But otherwise, it's the 2nd and 4th Tuesday like clockwork. And if you can make it, it's beneficial both ways. Council appreciates the opportunity to interact directly with folks. And if you're curious about what goes on in town and how the decision makers make their decisions, you get to witness it live and in person. Of course, our partners with Media Squatch also live stream those events, and a recording is available on youtube.com. We also post the approved minutes of every meeting on our website at www.bedfordva.gov under the town government heading. Getting back to Dwight Evanson's comments, he particularly thanked the Bedford Police Department for the great job they did with traffic control on Thursday night related to the fireworks and to the event at Liberty Lake Park. He also expressed his thanks for the service of all the volunteers in town, particularly with regard to the Habitat for Humanity project. Mayor C.G. Stanley, again, echoed the comments about the appreciation of folks physically being present at the meeting, and he recounted a list of several events that he had attended over the course of the last couple of weeks. CG noted that he'd been quite busy. On June 24th, he attended an event sponsored by the Bedford Chamber of Commerce, a presentation by Amanda Stanley on leadership with vision. CG shared his great impression with Ms. Stanley in particular in her presentation, and noted that vision is something that is important to him personally, and also speaking on behalf of council. They're making great efforts to really define things moving forward, and I will say that the work session last night is an example of that. Also, this council is working towards developing a formal strategic plan, which will lead to some very concrete outcomes. They're going to be meeting in October to develop that plan. That's also going to direct the budget for fiscal year 26-27, which will be upon us soon. So again, it's important to have a vision and to communicate that, because it also informs and directs pretty much everything else we do. On June 25th, CG noted that he attended a housing summit sponsored by the Central Virginia Planning District Commission. That was a very informational event with regard to the availability of grants, also visioning, and also strategic planning. CG noted that he visited the Habitat Blitz work site on South Street on Saturday, June 28th, and after that, he then went to a dedication at the Bauer Center for an outdoor learning center, which was dedicated in honor of Lucille Bogus. As many people know, Lucille was a longtime member of the Bedford Board of Supervisors and was also an elected official, and is also the sister of two of the Hoback brothers who were among the Bedford boys who did not return from D-Day. CG also expressed his compliments on the fireworks display and the event that took place at Liberty Lake Park, sponsored by Jonathan Hayden, and shared his personal view that this council is looking to expand uses of not only Liberty Lake, but all parks, and that council is developing a plan to make improvements to make sure that those parks function appropriately and meet the needs of those events and those activities. CG closed by noting that he attended the recognition of Reverend Henderson on Saturday, July 5th, honoring his 56 years of ministry at Washington Baptist Church. Next was a report of council committees. Dave Foster, who is the chair of the property committee, provided a recap of the work session that had taken place immediately prior to the regular council meeting. That work session was basically held at the instigation of the property committee. We then moved into the regular agenda. There were no public hearings scheduled for last night. The first item in the consent agenda was a request to close streets for Bedford Centerfest. That request came from the Central Virginia Business Coalition. Not going to go through the list of streets. We did that last night at the meeting, but it's basically the footprint of the Centerfest event that's been ongoing for many, many years now. That's currently presented by the Central Virginia Business Coalition. That's scheduled to take place on Saturday, September 20th. The street closures will begin from 6 a.m. and last until 4 o'clock p.m. on that day. On a motion by Councilman Stacey Haley, seconded by Councilman Jay Ippolito, Council unanimously approved the request to grant permission to close the streets for Bedford Centerfest, and again, that will take place Saturday, September 20th. The next item of new business related to acceptance of a World War II Heritage Cities grant. The World War II Heritage City program is something sponsored by the National Park Service. There is one locality in each state that is designated as a World War II Heritage Community, and in Virginia, that is the town of Bedford. That designation was granted through a joint effort including the town, the Bedford County Department of Tourism, and the National D-Day Memorial. And that designation took place a couple of years ago. We did receive a grant of $9,000 for promotional consideration to get the word out about our designation and to attract more attention to the town's particular heritage as it relates to World War II. Town Council last night was requested to adopt a resolution accepting the grant and authorizing staff to execute all the required contracts and documents associated with it. On a motion by Councilman Dave Foster, seconded by Councilman Stacy Haley, that motion was unanimously approved, and we will be getting more information out about the World War II Heritage Cities program and the town of Bedford's special role within it. The next item of business related to a grant from the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation for the Bedford Honor Bus. Some of you may or may not be aware, Bedford does have a bus system here in town. It's operated through the Bedford Community Health Foundation as part of this grant from DRPT. They provide service on specified days of the week throughout the community. The service is currently free, and that kind of goes back to the grant that we received to fund that. The full cost of the grant to run the Bedford Honor Bus service was over $193,000. There's a local match of 20%, which is about $39,000, which is paid by the Bedford Community Health Foundation. The town's role in this was to secure the grant and act as a fiscal agent for the pass-through. So in addition to this fact that this is a free bus service in town, it also costs the town and the taxpayers currently nothing at all. And that cost is borne by the Bedford Community Health Foundation, which of course is greatly appreciated. In order to receive the funds, the town had to adopt a resolution to accept the grant award and authorize staff to sign the related agreements. In discussion of this overall program, Councilman Dave Foster made a point to thank town staff for their efforts in securing this service. Again, noting that it's something worth $193,000. It's very tangible, and it currently costs citizens nothing at all. On a motion by Councilman Jay Ippolito, seconded by Councilman Foster, Town Council voted unanimously to accept the grant and authorize staff to execute the related documents. The next item of new business was a preliminary plat for the Harmony development. Some people are probably aware that there's been activity on the western side of town along the 460 bypass heading out towards Roanoke. On the south side, there's a development that's been ongoing for several years. The current occupants of that land are the Army Reserve Training Center, Royal Farms, and Hardee's. Back behind there are plans to construct about 300 residential units. That includes single-family detached homes as well as townhomes and the possibility of apartments. The developer has indicated that they are ready to move forward on the residential part of that, and that required a ministerial process mainly for council to clarify the exact boundaries and plan for developing those properties. In addition to kind of signaling the fact that the developer is ready to proceed, this also has relevance for some of the traffic control issues there. Obviously, there's a lot more traffic in conjunction with the commercial activities such as Hardee's and Royal Farms, a lot of crossing activity. There are plans for a traffic light to be installed at that intersection, at that crossing, and that goes back to the original approval of this development, which dates back to 2012, actually. In fact, when the project was originally approved, half of it was located within the county and half of it was within town limits. With the reversion in 2013, that all came into town limits, so the town is actually the administrative agent for planning and zoning activities such as this. In conversations with both the developer and VDOT, we are been advised that the residential portion will certainly trigger the warrants for a traffic light, and we're working on the specifics involved in that installation, the responsibilities, the costs, and exactly how that will work. And of course, I offered the editorial comment last night that wouldn't be a bad thing if that happens sooner rather than later, as we see increased traffic and particularly crossing actions on the major thoroughfare there on 460. Last night, on a motion by Councilman Stacy Haley, seconded by Vice Mayor Darrell Updike, the council approved the preliminary plat for Harmony in Bedford residential subdivision with certain conditions that were recommended by the Planning Commission at their July 2nd meeting. Of course, the vote to do so, to approve that plat, was unanimous by all members of council. The last item of new business related to the Town of Bedford's Equal Opportunity Employer Statement. That is something that we update on a regular basis. When approved by Town Council, the signed written statement is posted on the town's legal posting board in the municipal building, and it governs overall the activities of our hiring process for all positions. Essentially, it states that we do not discriminate against anyone who is a member of a protected class, and that all decisions for hiring are based on merit. On a motion by Vice Mayor Updike, seconded by Councilman Stacy Haley, Town Council unanimously voted to approve the annual issuance of the Town of Bedford's Equal Opportunity Employer Statement. And with that, Town Council completed the work of their published agenda and adjourned. Again, appreciate your attention to this podcast. We encourage you to stay engaged with the community, particularly with Town Council. If you have any questions, concerns, suggestions, we're happy to receive those anytime. Town Hall is located at 215 East Main Street. The business hours for the administrative portion of the building are 8:30 a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m., except when we're closed for a holiday. The treasurer's office does close at 4:30 p.m., and that's because in addition to waiting to receive payments from customers who walk in, they are also processing a variety of administrative tasks on a daily basis, and closing their doors at 4:30 allows them to do that without incurring a great deal of overtime, which is costly to the town and also obviously affects the quality of life of our employees. But we encourage you to stop by 215 East Main Street during regular business hours. You can call us at 540-587-6001. Or if you want to reach out to me directly by email, that would be wonderful. My email address is bwarner, BWARNER, at bedfordva.gov. And of course, my name is Bart Warner, and it is my very great privilege to serve as the town manager for what we promote as being the world's best little town. Again, I thank you very much for joining me for this podcast, and hope you will make plans to attend our next council meeting, which will be Tuesday, July 22nd at 7 o'clock p.m. Until then, I hope everyone is enjoying a very pleasant summer, good health, and good cheer.